The great chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest room Jake Carter had ever seen. Crystal walls rose hundreds of feet into the air, glowing with soft blue light. Floating platforms held representatives from 47 different alien species, each one older than human civilization itself. Some had scales, some had feathers, and some had forms that human eyes could barely understand. The air smelled strange, a mix of chemicals designed to keep every species comfortable. Jake stood at the small platform assigned to humanity. It was placed near the bottom of the chamber, lower than almost everyone else. This position was not an accident. It was a reminder of where humans belonged in the eyes of the Council. Beside Jake stood his team. Commander Lisa Monroe was a tall woman with sharp eyes and silver hair tied back in a tight knot. She had spent 20 years in the Earth Defense Force before becoming a diplomat. Dr. Kevin Price was younger, with messy brown hair and glasses that he constantly pushed up his nose. He was the smartest person Jake knew when it came to alien technology. Amy Saunders completed the group. She was small and quiet, but she understood alien cultures better than anyone on Earth. Today was supposed to be different. Today, humanity would finally receive full membership in the Galactic Council. They had waited 200 years for this moment. 200 years of following every rule, accepting every restriction, and proving themselves worthy. The High Arbiter floated forward on his platform. His name was Zethral, and he belonged to the Veluxi species. He looked like a giant insect with 6 legs, 2 large eyes, and mandibles that clicked when he spoke. A translation device turned his clicks into words that Jake could understand. The Council has reviewed humanity's petition for full membership, Zethral announced. His voice echoed through the chamber. We have carefully considered their progress over the past observation period. Jake felt his heart beating faster. Lisa placed a steady hand on his shoulder. The Council has decided, Zethral continued, to deny the petition. The words hit Jake like a punch to the stomach. Denied. Again. This was the 7th time in 50 years. Humanity remains too young, Zethral explained. Your species has existed for only a brief moment compared to the elder races. Your expansion across 12 star systems in 2 centuries shows dangerous aggression. We recommend another 50 years of observation status. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Jake looked up at the alien faces staring down at him. Most showed no emotion. Some showed something worse. Pity. One by one, other species rose to speak. The Dazari representative, a being made of flowing silver liquid, talked about human wars. He listed conflicts from Earth's history as proof that humans could not be trusted. The Kelvani ambassador, who resembled a floating jellyfish, mentioned human movies and video games. He called them evidence of violent minds. The Malari representative simply laughed. His species controlled most of the trade routes in the galaxy, and he saw no reason to share power with newcomers. Biological species under 10,000 years of civilization have no place making decisions for the galaxy, the Malari said. Perhaps in another few millennia, if you survive that long. Dr. Kevin Price leaned close to Jake. They're never going to accept us, he whispered. We could wait 1,000 years and they'd find another excuse. Jake knew Kevin was right. He had spent 15 years of his life working toward this moment. 15 years of smiling through insults. 15 years of accepting unfair trade deals that kept Earth poor while other species grew rich. 15 years of watching humanity's dreams crushed by ancient prejudice. He looked at Lisa, then at Kevin, then at Amy. They all had the same look in their eyes. They were tired. Tired of begging for respect that would never come. Something changed inside Jake at that moment. A wall that had held back his frustration for years suddenly crumbled. He was done asking permission to exist. When the vote finished, the result was 43 against humanity and only 4 in favor. The Allery, a peaceful species of plant-like beings, had supported them. So had 3 smaller races that remembered what it felt like to be dismissed by the powerful. Zethral raised his manipulator limbs. "Does the human delegation have any response?" Jake straightened his uniform. He picked up his datapad from the podium. His movements were calm and controlled, though his heart raced inside his chest. "Distinguished representatives," he said, his voice clear and steady. "The human delegation thanks you for your time and consideration." The aliens waited for the usual acceptance speech. The humble words about trying harder. The promise to return in 50 years with another petition. Those words never came. "We withdraw our petition," Jake said. Permanently. Confusion spread across the chamber. Platforms shifted as aliens leaned forward to hear better. "Furthermore," Jake continued, "humanity hereby withdraws from all Galactic Council proceedings. This withdrawal is effective immediately. We thank you for the opportunities you have provided. We wish you well in your future deliberations." He gestured to his team. Lisa, Kevin, and Amy gathered their belongings without a word. They had not planned this. They had not discussed it. But somehow, they all understood. The human delegation walked toward the exit. Their footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Then the chamber exploded with noise. Aliens shouted questions. Platforms crashed into each other as representatives tried to reach the humans. Zethral's mandibles clicked so fast that the translation device could not keep up. "You cannot simply leave," someone shouted. "This is unprecedented." Another voice called. "They will come back," the Malari ambassador laughed. "They have no choice." Jake did not turn around. He walked through the great doors of the chamber with his team beside him. The doors closed behind them, cutting off the chaos. In the hallway, Lisa finally spoke. "Jake, what did we just do?" Jake took a deep breath. His hands were shaking slightly, but his voice remained calm. "We stopped asking for permission." Amy looked worried. "The Council controls everything. Trade routes, technology sharing, defense agreements. How will we survive?" "The same way we always have," Jake replied. "By being human. By adapting. By finding another way." Kevin actually smiled. "You know what? I think I've been waiting 15 years to see that look on Zethral's face." They walked through the station toward their ship. Behind them, alarms began to sound as the Council called an emergency session. Ahead of them lay the unknown. Earth had just walked away from the most powerful organization in the galaxy. Nobody knew what would happen next but for the first time in 200 years, humanity would decide its own future. 3 months had passed since the humans walked out of the Council chamber. High Arbiter Zethral stood on his platform, looking down at 4 empty chairs. Those chairs had been placed there for human observers. They were small and uncomfortable, designed to remind humanity of their low status. Now they sat empty, gathering dust. Zethral had expected the humans to return within days. A week at most. Every species eventually realized they needed the Council. The galaxy was too dangerous, too complicated to survive alone. The humans would come crawling back, apologize for their outburst, and accept whatever terms the Council offered. That had not happened. The emergency session he called that day had lasted for hours. Representatives argued about what the walkout meant. Most believed it was a bluff. The Malari ambassador had laughed and said humans were like children throwing a tantrum. They would calm down soon enough. But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. The humans did not return. They did not send messages. They did not ask for forgiveness. Instead, strange things began to happen across the galaxy. Counselor Velsara of the Thesari Collective requested an urgent meeting. Her liquid form bubbled with anxiety as she addressed the assembly. "We have a problem," she announced. Human cargo ships have disappeared from our trade routes. This might not sound serious, but it was. Human ships had become common sights along major transit corridors. They were fast, reliable, and cheap. Many species had come to depend on them for moving goods between systems. Surely we can replace them, someone said. We cannot, Valsara replied. Human shipping rates were 40% lower than Council alternatives. Our merchants cannot afford the increase. Several have already gone bankrupt. More reports followed. Human engineers who maintained equipment on border stations had quietly packed their bags and gone home. These engineers had special skills that other species had never bothered to learn. Why would they, when humans were always willing to do the difficult work? Human doctors had closed their clinics on dozens of worlds. These clinics had treated species that Council medical facilities often ignored. The poor, the forgotten, the beings from races too small to matter. Now they had nowhere to go. Human teachers had left schools where they taught young aliens about science and mathematics. Human musicians had stopped performing at cultural centers. Human artists had removed their work from galleries. Piece by piece, the humans had woven themselves into the fabric of galactic society. Nobody had noticed how deeply they were connected until they were gone. Ambassador Tethal of the Malari Empire stopped laughing. His species controlled the trade routes, but those routes were increasingly empty. Ships chose new paths to avoid Malari taxes. Cathal's government demanded answers. He had none to give. The Council sent messages to Earth, official communications asking for clarification, informal requests for discussion, even a carefully worded apology that blamed the walkout on miscommunication. Earth responded with a single statement from Lisa Monroe, who now held the title of Secretary of External Affairs. Humanity spent 2 centuries asking permission to exist among you. We have decided to stop asking. Nothing more. No demands. No threats. Just silence. Intelligence reports began arriving from the edges of Council space. Human ships had been spotted in regions the Council rarely visited. The neutral zone, they called it. A lawless area where species rejected by the Council made their homes. The Varaks. Syndicate lived in the neutral zone. They were a coalition of beings who had refused Council membership centuries ago. The Council considered them criminals and outcasts. Now human diplomats sat at Varaks tables, sharing meals and making deals. This is unacceptable, Zethral declared. The Varaks are dangerous. They reject civilized law. Councilor Miraset of the Alari, one of the 4 who had supported humanity, spoke up. Her leaves rustled with quiet anger. The Varaks rejected our law because our law rejected them, just as we rejected the humans. Perhaps we should ask ourselves why so many species prefer their company to ours. Her words made the chamber uncomfortable. Nobody wanted to admit that the Council might be wrong. Months continued to pass. The empty chairs remained empty, but they seemed to grow larger somehow, as if the absence they represented was expanding. Reports described human colonies thriving. Earth had turned its attention inward, strengthening connections between its 12 worlds. Resources that once went toward Council fees now went toward building schools and hospitals. Scientists who once worked on Council projects now developed new technologies for human use. Most disturbing of all, rumors spoke of human engineers working with Varak scientists on something new. A type of engine that could travel between stars without using the Council-controlled relay network. If these rumors were true, the Council's greatest advantage would disappear. Zethral remembered the day the humans left. He remembered thinking they were making a terrible mistake. Walking away from power always seemed foolish to those who held it, but perhaps walking away was itself a form of power. The power to say no. The power to refuse again with unfair rules. The power to build something new instead of begging for scraps from an old table. to Kelvani. Commonwealth sent a quiet message to Earth, asking about trade opportunities. When news of this leaked, 3 other species made similar inquiries. They claimed they were simply exploring options. Zethral knew better. They were testing the waters, wondering if life outside the Council might be possible. At the next Council session, Zethral looked at those empty chairs. They had been designed to make humans feel small. Now they made the Council feel incomplete. What do we do? Asked one of the younger representatives. Zethral had no answer. In 3,000 years of Council history, no species had ever voluntarily walked away. There were no rules for this situation, no precedent to follow. The humans had done something the Council never expected. They had stopped playing by Council rules entirely. And somehow, they were winning. Outside the Great Chamber, the galaxy continued to turn. Ships flew, stations hummed, and beings of countless species went about their lives. But something had shifted. A crack had appeared in the foundation of galactic order. The Council had spent centuries believing that power came from controlling others. The humans were about to teach them a different lesson. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away. 1 year had passed since the walkout. The galaxy looked very different now. Commander Greg Lawson stood on the bridge of his ship, the Endeavor. Through the wide windows, he watched dozens of vessels pass by. Cargo ships, passenger transports, scientific vessels, and trading frigates all moved through space in organized patterns. They came from 100 different worlds, and they all had one thing in common. None of them belonged to the Galactic Council. This was Station Horizon. And Greg still could not believe what it had become. 1 year ago, Station Horizon was a small human outpost on the edge of explored space. It had a few repair bays, a medical clinic, and a trading post that barely made enough money to stay open. Council representatives had laughed at it. They called it a waste of resources. Now, Station Horizon was the largest trading center outside Council territory. Ships waited in line for days just to dock. Merchants from species the Council had ignored for centuries came here to buy and sell goods. The station had grown so fast that construction crews worked around the clock to build new sections. Greg's communicator buzzed. "Commander, we have another convoy requesting passage through Sector 7. Origin?" Greg asked. "Tesseri Freehold, sir. 12 ships carrying medical supplies." Greg smiled. The Tesseri had been among the first to ally with humanity. They were a loose group of smaller species that the Council had never considered important. For centuries, they had survived on scraps, trading among themselves while Council members ignored them. When humanity reached out with an offer of friendship instead of demands, the Tesseri had accepted without hesitation. "Grant them passage," Greg said, "and send a welcome message. Tell them we are honored by their presence." This was how humanity did things now. No fees for using trade routes. No permits required to travel. No endless forms and waiting periods. Just respect and cooperation. Far from Station Horizon, on a planet called New Geneva, Dr. Natalie Cross was making history. Natalie led a team of human scientists working alongside researchers from the Vorak Syndicate. The Voraks looked frightening to human eyes, with their gray skin, sharp teeth, and 4 arms. Council propaganda had painted them as monsters for centuries. But Natalie had learned the truth. The Voraks were brilliant scientists who simply refused to share their knowledge with species that treated them like criminals. "The protein sequence is complete," announced Vorax. Researcher called Krath. His deep voice rumbled like distant thunder. "We can begin testing tomorrow." Natalie looked at the data on her screen. After months of work, they had done it. A universal vaccine delivery system that could protect any carbon-based life form against the most common diseases in the galaxy. Council scientists had declared such a thing impossible. They said the biological differences between species were too great. They had been wrong. How many lives will this save? Natalie asked quietly. Kraft placed one of his hands on her shoulder. Despite his fearsome appearance, his touch was gentle. Millions, perhaps billions. Species that the Council left to suffer will finally have protection. This was the true power of cooperation. Humans had creative minds that found solutions where others saw only problems. The Voraks had centuries of biological knowledge accumulated through careful study. Together, they accomplished what neither could have done alone. Back in Council space, the effects of humanity's departure continued to spread. Trade revenues had dropped by 30%. The Council had always charged fees for everything. Fees to use jump relays. Fees to dock at stations. Fees to transport goods through certain corridors. These fees had funded the Council's massive bureaucracy for thousands of years. Now traders had choices. They could pay Council fees, or they could use the new routes that passed through human-allied territory. The new routes were longer, but they were free. Many chose freedom over convenience. Species began asking uncomfortable questions. Why did Council membership cost so much when humanity's alliances cost nothing? Why did the Council restrict technology sharing when humans gave away innovations freely? Why did the Council demand loyalty when humans asked only for friendship? The Calvini Commonwealth made their decision quietly. After centuries of Council membership, they reduced their status to observer. Their official reason was economic difficulty. Everyone knew the truth. They were testing life outside the Council's control. Others followed. The Vizari Collective opened formal trade negotiations with Station Horizon. A small species called the Marathi, who had been denied Council membership for 800 years, joined the Tesseri freeholds. Every week brought new announcements. High Arbiter Zethral watched his empire crumble piece by piece. He called emergency sessions that solved nothing. He threatened species who traded with humans, but his threats felt hollow. What could he do? The Council's power had always depended on being the only option. Now, there was another option, and it was better. The most frightening news came from deep space. Human engineers, working with Vorak scientists and Tesseri pilots, had completed testing of a new engine design. This engine could jump between stars without using the ancient relay network that the Council controlled. The relays were the foundation of Council power. They had been built by a species that vanished millions of years ago. Nobody knew how to create new ones. Whoever controlled the relays controlled the galaxy. Now humans had made the relays unnecessary. Amy Saunders, serving as Earth's Secretary of Interstellar Relations, announced the new technology at a public gathering on Station Horizon. Representatives from 60 species attended, none of them Council members. This engine belongs to everyone, Amy declared. We will share the designs freely with any species that wants them. The stars were never meant to be controlled by a few. They belong to all of us. The crowd erupted in cheers. Beings who had spent their lives feeling small and powerless suddenly saw a future where they mattered. On his platform in the Council chamber, Zethral received the news. His mandibles clicked slowly as he processed what it meant. The humans had not attacked the Council. They had not fired a single weapon. They had not even spoken harshly about their former partners. They had simply built something better and invited everyone to join. Against such a strategy, Zethral had no defense. You could not fight an enemy who offered you gifts. You could not defeat a rival who helped your own citizens more than you did. The humans had found a weapon more powerful than any fleet. They had found the power of generosity, and the galaxy was changing forever because of it. 2 years after the walkout, High Arbiter Zethral stood before a broken council. The great chamber that once held representatives from 47 species now felt half empty. Platforms that should have been occupied sat dark and silent. The crystals on the walls seemed dimmer somehow, as if the building itself knew that something had changed. 7 species had formally withdrawn from council membership. They did not make angry speeches or issue dramatic statements. They simply sent polite letters thanking the council for its past guidance and explaining that they had decided to explore other opportunities. Everyone knew what those opportunities were. 12 more species had reduced their participation to observer status. They still attended meetings sometimes, but they no longer voted. They no longer paid full fees. They sat in the back of the chamber and watched as the council argued about problems it could not solve. The numbers told a terrible story. Trade revenue had dropped by 40%. Many of the remaining members had stopped paying their fees entirely. The council's treasury, once overflowing with wealth from 1,000 worlds, was running dangerously low. Zethral looked at the faces of those who remained. He saw fear, confusion, and anger. Some blamed the humans for their problems. Others blamed each other. A few, quietly, blamed themselves. The Malari Empire had suffered the worst of any species. For centuries, they had grown rich by controlling major trade routes. Ships had no choice but to pass through Malari space, paying heavy taxes for the privilege. The Malari had used this wealth to build fleets, bribe politicians, and maintain their position near the top of council hierarchy. Now those trade routes sat empty. The new human-built corridors offered faster travel with no taxes at all. Merchants who once grumbled about Malari fees simply stopped coming. The Malari economy collapsed within 18 months. Ambassador Cato, who had laughed at the humans on the day of the walkout, was gone. His government had fallen to internal revolt. Citizens who had lost everything demanded change. Cato had fled to a remote colony, hiding from those who blamed him for their suffering. His replacement stood before the council now. She was younger than Cato, with scales that shimmered green instead of his dull brown. Her name was Selvari, and she carried a very different message. "We underestimated them," she admitted. Her voice was soft, but it carried through the silent chamber. "We saw their short lives and assumed they thought only of the present. We saw their history of conflict and assumed they would destroy themselves. We were wrong about everything." Zethral wanted to argue, but what could he say? The evidence surrounded them. Empty platforms, empty treasury, empty trade routes. "Perhaps," Selvari continued, "we should consider asking them to return." The suggestion sparked immediate debate. Some representatives shouted that humanity should be punished for causing this crisis. Others pointed out that humanity had caused nothing. They had simply left. Everything that followed was the council's own failure. After hours of argument, the council reached a decision. They would send an invitation to Earth, an offer to discuss renewed participation in galactic governance. The language was carefully chosen to sound welcoming without admitting fault. Amy Saunders received the invitation at her office on Station Horizon. She read it 3 times before responding. Part of her wanted to feel satisfied. They had won. The Great Galactic Council was begging humanity to return, but satisfaction felt hollow. She remembered the chamber. She remembered the condescending speeches and the dismissive votes. She remembered every time she had smiled through insults because diplomacy required patience. She contacted Jake Carter, who now served as Earth's president after winning election by a massive margin. His face appeared on her screen, looking older than when they had walked out together. Leading humanity through such a dramatic change had taken a toll. "They want us back," Amy said. Jake nodded slowly. "I saw the message. What do you think?" "I think they're not inviting us because they respect us. They're inviting us because they're afraid." "You're probably right," Jake agreed. "So, what do we do?" Amy thought about this question for a long time. She thought about revenge, about making the council pay for centuries of mistreatment, She thought about rejection, about refusing their invitation and watching them collapse completely. But then she thought about what humanity actually valued. Not dominance, not revenge. Something the council had forgotten how to practice. "We go back," Amy said finally. "But not alone, and not to rejoin what they built. We go back to offer something better." 3 weeks later, the human delegation returned to the council chamber. But they did not walk in alone. Jake Carter led the group. Behind him came Amy, Lisa Monroe, Kevin Price, and a dozen other human diplomats. But behind them came something the council had never seen. Representatives from the Tessari. Freeholds walked beside humans as equals. Varax delegates, their gray skin and sharp teeth making council members nervous, stood proudly in the open. 23 species who had never been offered council membership entered the great chamber for the first time. Zethral stared at the crowd gathering below his platform. This was not what he had expected. He had imagined a small human group coming to negotiate terms for rejoining the existing structure. "We received your invitation," Jake announced. His voice was calm and steady, just as it had been on the day he walked out. "We appreciate the gesture, but we are not here to rejoin your institution." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Zethral's mandibles clicked with confusion. "Then why are you here?" he asked. Jake smiled slightly. "We are here to replace it with something better, something that includes everyone." He gestured to the beings standing behind him. "These are our friends, our partners, our equals. Some of them have waited centuries for a seat in this chamber. Some were rejected by your votes. Some were never even considered worthy of notice." A Tessari representative stepped forward. Her scales gleamed under the chamber lights. "For 800 cycles, my people asked for membership. Each time, you told us we were too small, too weak, too unimportant. The humans never asked what we could offer them. They only asked how they could help." A Varax delegate spoke next. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "You called us monsters, criminals, outcasts. The humans called us partners. They shared technology freely. They treated us with respect. They showed us what the galaxy could be." One by one, representatives from forgotten species stepped forward to share similar stories. Each one had been dismissed by the council. Each one had found acceptance with humanity. The chamber exploded in shouting. Some council members demanded that the outsiders leave immediately. Others screamed that this was some kind of trick. A few sat in stunned silence, watching everything they had built crumble around them. But among the chaos, other voices rose. Species tired of paying fees that funded nothing. Species tired of being told their place in a hierarchy they had never agreed to. Species who looked at the humans and their allies and saw something better than what they currently had. Councillor Miraset of the Allery, who had supported humanity from the beginning, raised her branches to signal she wished to speak. The chamber slowly fell quiet. "For 3,000 years," she said, "this council has operated on one principle. Power determines worth. Those with fleets and resources make decisions. Those without must accept whatever is given to them." She turned to face Jake. "The humans are offering a different principle." "What is it?" Jake met her gaze steadily. "Equality. Regardless of how old your species is or how many ships you have, every voice matters. Every being deserves respect." The word hung in the air. Equality, such a simple concept, such a dangerous one. Zethral understood in that moment that the council he had led for decades was already dead. The humans had not killed it with weapons. They had killed it with an idea. And ideas, once released, could not be stopped. 5 years had passed since the walkout. The galaxy had transformed in ways that nobody could have predicted. Ambassador Ben Torres stood at a podium in the center of the Interstellar Assembly Hall. He was only 32 years old, young by any measure. The elder species still struggled to understand why humans placed capable individuals in positions of power, regardless of their age. But they were learning. The assembly hall was different from the old council chamber. There were no platforms at different heights to show who mattered more. Every delegation sat at the same level, arranged in a great circle that symbolized equality. The walls were made of transparent crystal, allowing natural starlight to fill the space. It felt open and welcoming, nothing like the oppressive grandeur of the council. Over 100 species had sent representatives to this anniversary celebration. Some had been council members who chose to join the new system. Others had been outcasts who finally found a place where they belonged. All of them sat together now, united by principles that the old council had never understood. Men looked out at the crowd and felt the weight of this moment. 5 years ago, he had been a junior diplomat watching Ambassador Jake Carter walk out of the council chamber. He remembered feeling terrified that day. He thought humanity was making a terrible mistake. Now he understood that it had the best decision their species ever made. 5 years ago, then began. His voice carrying across the silent hall. Humanity left the Galactic Council. Many thought we were being childish. Walking away because we did not get what we wanted. Running from problems instead of facing them. He paused, letting the memory settle over the assembly. That is not why we left. We left because staying meant accepting that some species matter more than others. We left because participation in injustice is itself a kind of injustice. We left because sometimes the only way to change a broken system is to build a better one. In the Earth delegation section, Admiral Lisa Monroe watched with pride. She had commanded fleets through the uncertain years after the walkout. She had protected human colonies from species who thought they could take advantage of Earth's isolation. She had trained a new generation of officers who understood that strength meant more than firepower. Now, there was no need for such vigilance. The Assembly's mutual defense agreements protected all members equally. No species threatened another, because doing so meant facing everyone else. Peace had become profitable, and war had become foolish. Beside Lisa sat retired Ambassador Jake Carter. His hair had turned completely gray, and lines marked his face that had not been there 5 years ago. Leading humanity through such dramatic change had cost him greatly. But looking at what they had built, he regretted nothing. Amy Saunders sat nearby, now serving as Director of Interstellar Cooperation. Her job was to help new species join the Assembly and to ensure that every voice was heard. It was the work she had always wanted to do. The Council had made it impossible. The Assembly made it essential. Kevin Price had returned to scientific research. He led a team that shared technology freely across species boundaries. Discoveries that would have been hoarded and sold under the old system now spread rapidly to anyone who could use them. Disease rates had dropped across the galaxy. Energy efficiency had improved. Travel between stars had become faster and safer. Dr. Nathalie Cross had won the Assembly's highest honor for her work on the universal vaccine system. The disease that had once killed millions each year was now almost extinct. Children who would have died grew up healthy instead. She considered this her true reward. Greg Lawson still commanded Station Horizon, though it had grown so large that it was now called Horizon City. Millions of beings from hundreds of species lived there permanently. It was the most diverse place in the known galaxy, and somehow it worked. People who had been taught to hate each other learned to live as neighbors. Ben continued his speech, describing the principles that guided the Assembly. Equal representation regardless of power. Decisions made by consensus rather than force. Rights that could not be voted away by majority rule. These ideas had come from humanity's own painful history. They knew what happened when some people decided that others did not deserve respect. The old council believed that order required control, men said. They thought that peace came from having someone in charge. They were wrong. True order comes from cooperation. True peace comes from justice. When he finished speaking, the hall erupted in applause. Beings of every shape and size showed appreciation in their own ways. Some clapped hands. Some clicked mandibles. Some flashed colors across their skin. The sound was strange and beautiful, a symphony of species united by common purpose. After the ceremony, a young Veluxi delegate approached the human section. She was small for her species, with bright eyes that showed curiosity rather than the cold calculation that Jake remembered from his dealings with Zethral. "My grandmother was on the council when you walked out," she said. "She told me humans were dangerous, that you would destroy everything the elder species had built." Jake looked at her calmly. Was she right? The young Veluxi considered the question. Yes and no. You did destroy what they built, but you destroyed something that deserved to be destroyed. And you built something better in its place. Amy Saunders reached out and took the young delegate's manipulator limb in a gesture of friendship. "We prefer the word persistent to dangerous," she said with a smile. The young Veluxi made a sound that might have been laughter. "Persistence. Yes, my grandmother said humans never gave up." She meant it as criticism. "I think it might be your greatest strength." Outside the great windows of the assembly hall, ships from 100 worlds passed in peaceful transit. Human vessels flew alongside Veluxi traders. Tesseri explorers shared routes with Varax science ships. Malari cargo carriers, their economy rebuilt under new principles, delivered goods without charging the crushing fees of old. The ancient relay network still functioned, but it was no longer the only way to travel. The new jump engines that humanity had developed with Varax's help had spread to every corner of the galaxy. No single species controlled movement between stars. The freedom of the void belonged to everyone. Jake watched the ships and thought about the day. He walked out of the council chamber. He had not planned it. He had not calculated the consequences. He had simply reached a point where he could no longer accept being treated as lesser done. Sometimes that was all it took. The courage to say no. The strength to walk away from a situation that demanded too much and offered too little. The wisdom to know that you deserve better, even when those in power tell you otherwise. Humanity had spent 2 centuries asking the galaxy for acceptance. They had begged for respect they should have demanded from the start. When they finally stopped asking and started building, everything changed. The council had believed that power meant controlling others. Humanity showed them that true power meant inspiring others to stand beside you willingly. The old order had crumbled. A new one had risen in its place. And somewhere in the eternal darkness between stars, the future waited for species brave enough to reach for it together. Lisa. Monroe stepped beside Jake as they watched the ships fly by. "We did something remarkable, didn't we?" Jake nodded slowly. "We did what humans have always done. We faced a problem that seemed impossible, and we refused to accept that it couldn't be solved." In the assembly hall behind them, representatives from over 100 species continued celebrating their anniversary. They had come from different worlds, different cultures, different histories, but they shared something now. A belief that every being mattered. A commitment to building something better than what came before. This was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not technology, not military might, not economic power. Just an idea. A simple, dangerous, beautiful idea. Everyone deserves a seat at the table. And if nobody offers you one, build your own table and invite everyone to join.